Hey, my name's Ben. I'm 26 and I work in construction out in the suburbs of Boulder, Colorado. It's not a glamorous life, but it's mine. Waking up at dawn to jog in the biting spring chill of the mountains, spending my days hauling materials and hammering away at job sites, then coming home to a simple apartment where I heat up ramen or crack open a beer with a couple of old buddies on the weekends. I've got a routine that keeps me grounded. Work, workouts, hanging out, and yeah, a bit of that quiet loneliness that creeps in when the day is done. I fell hard for a girl back in college, but that ended a year ago in a mess of arguments and drifting apart. Since then, I've kept my guard up. No apps, no setups, no chasing anything that feels like it could hurt again. Maybe that's why when Emma, the new hire at the office, who's all blonde hair and endless energy, dragged me into this blind date thing, I didn't put up much of a fight. Ben, come on, let me set you up with someone fun. Worst case, it's a free coffee and a story to laugh about, she said, her eyes sparkling like she was plotting world domination. I chuckled and texted back, fine, as long as it's not some prank. Truth is, I was curious or maybe just tired of the same old nights staring at my ceiling fan. It was a late Sunday evening when I headed out. I threw on my cleanest button-up shirt, nothing fancy, just a plain blue one, and drove downtown to this vintage cafe on Pearl Street. I'd been there before, nursing a black coffee while watching rain streak the windows last year, back when everything felt raw. The place had that cozy vibe, warm golden lights hanging from exposed beams, the faint scent of croissants baking, and soft jazz tunes from the 80s humming in the background. I grabbed a table by the window, ordered a black coffee to steady my nerves, and waited. My heart picked up a bit every time the door chimed, wondering if this mystery woman would show or if I'd end up scrolling my phone like an idiot. Then she walked in. A woman in her late 30s with long brown hair cascading over her shoulders, a soft beige sweater hugging her frame, and an air of quiet elegance that made the room feel smaller. Her eyes, bright but carrying a hint of something deeper, like old stories, scanned the place until they landed on me. For a split second, everything froze. It was Lena. Lena, as in Mark's ex-wife. Mark, my college buddy. The guy I'd shared dorm rooms and late-night beers with. The one who'd married her right after graduation when she was barely out of her 20s. I'd met her a handful of times back then, at their wedding, a couple of barbecues, but she always seemed like a background figure, sweet but distant. They'd divorced a few years later, something about growing apart that no one really talked about. Mark and I had drifted too, reduced to occasional birthday texts, and now, here she was, standing in front of me on a blind date. We both stared, recognition hitting like a cold gust off the flatirons. Lena broke the silence first, her lips curving into an awkward smile. Ben, is that you? She said, her voice soft but steady. With that same gentle lilt I remembered from years ago, I managed to laugh, rubbing the back of my neck. Yeah, Lena. Wow, small world. You're the date? She nodded, sliding into the seat across from me without bolting, which I half expected. Apparently, Emma's your matchmaker? I confirmed with a grin, and she shook her head in amusement. Mine's a coworker too. Guess the universe has a sense of humor. We ordered another coffee for me, a latte for her, and the initial weirdness started to thaw. It felt surreal, sitting across from my old friend's ex, but there was no anger or bitterness in her eyes, just a calm curiosity. We steered clear of Mark at first, chatting about safe stuff, my construction gigs, how the latest school build was going over budget because of supply chain hiccups, her job at the university library organizing late-night study sessions and helping kids dig up obscure research. She laughed when I joked about nearly dropping a beam on my foot last week, and I found myself relaxing, really listening. Lena wasn't the quiet wife I remembered from those old gatherings. She was thoughtful, with a dry wit that snuck up on you, and stories about hiking trails she'd discovered around Boulder that made me want to lace up my boots right then. As the conversation flowed, I caught glimpses of who she was now, someone who'd rebuilt herself piece by piece. Life's funny, she said at one point, stirring her latte. You think you're done with surprises, and then bam, a blind date with someone from your past. I nodded, admitting, I almost bailed 10 minutes in, but this isn't half bad. She smiled, a real one that lit up her face, making her look younger, more alive. We talked about pets. She had a rescue cat named Whiskers who hated mornings and sports, how I still played pickup basketball on weekends. The jazz in the background faded into the hum of our voices, and for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about my ex or the empty apartment waiting for me. By the time the cafe started dimming lights signaling closing time, the awkwardness had vanished. This is weird, right? Running into your ex-husband's old friend like this, Lena said as we gathered our things, her tone light but probing. I paused, then shrugged honestly. Weird, yeah, but not bad weird. Kind of relieving. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Me too, I wasn't sure I'd even stay, but I'm glad I did. We stepped out into the cool night air, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. I hesitated at the curb, not wanting to push, but before I could say anything, Lena turned to me. Ben, can I get your number in case we want to talk late like this again? Her eyes met mine, a mix of vulnerability and spark. I pulled out my phone, heart thumping a little harder. Yeah, of course. We exchanged numbers, and as she walked away toward her car, I stood there for a minute, watching the spring breeze tousle her hair. This wasn't just a blind date anymore. It felt like the start of something I hadn't seen coming. The morning after hit me like a fresh mountain breeze, clear, a little crisp, and unexpectedly invigorating. I woke up to my alarm blaring at 6 a.m., the usual routine kicking in, lace up my running shoes, hit the trails around my apartment complex where the spring air still carried a bite from the Rockies. But as I pounded the pavement, my mind kept drifting back to Lena. Her smile, the way she'd laughed without holding back, the ease of our conversation in that dimly lit cafe. It felt like a dream, one I wasn't sure I wanted to wake from. By the time I got back sweaty and out of breath, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was her. Last night was surprisingly fun. Thanks for not running for the hills. If you're free, want to grab a walk this weekend? Weather's supposed to hold up. I stared at the screen for a second, a grin creeping across my face. Without overthinking it, I typed back, "Sounds good. Sunday at Chautauqua Park?" Sunday rolled around quicker than I expected. I pulled into the parking lot at the base of the Flatirons, the massive rock formations looming like silent guardians over the green meadows. The sun was out, casting a soft, golden light over everything, and the air smelled like pine and fresh earth. I spotted Lena waiting near the trailhead, looking effortlessly put together, in a simple sundress and sneakers, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She waved as I approached, and that same spark from the cafe lit up her eyes. "Hey, you made it," she said, falling into step beside me as we started up the path. "I wasn't sure if you'd bail after the weirdness of it all." We walked at an easy pace, the trail winding through wildflowers and open fields. Conversation flowed naturally at first, light stuff, like how I'd spent the week wrestling with the delayed shipment of rebar at the job site, or how she was organizing a workshop for undergrads on archival research at the university library. "It's rewarding," she said, stepping over a root, "seeing these kids light up when they find some obscure document that ties everything together. Makes the late nights worth it." I nodded, sharing a story about the school project I was on, how we were framing out the gymnasium, and I'd caught a kid from the neighborhood peeking through the fence, wide-eyed at the progress. It felt good, talking shop without any pressure. But as the path leveled out and we found a bench overlooking the valley, things shifted deeper. I glanced at her, the wind tousling a strand of her hair. "Lena, how have you been? Really, since everything?" She sat down, her gaze drifting to the horizon, and for a moment I wondered if I'd pushed too far. But then she sighed, a soft, reflective sound. "You mean since the divorce?" "Honestly, Ben, it's been a journey. People see it as a failure, right? Like, you messed up the one thing you're supposed to get right. But for me, it was like breaking free from a cage I didn't even know I was in. With Mark, I was always trying so hard to be the perfect wife, to keep things smooth, to ignore the parts where I felt invisible. He'd come home late, we'd argue about nothing, and I'd end up feeling like I was the problem. After we split, it took me a year just to breathe again. I learned to eat alone at restaurants, buy myself flowers, even take solo trips up to Estes Park. It was scary, but it taught me to love myself first. Her words hung in the air, raw and honest, and I felt a pang of empathy twist in my chest. I'd never heard the full story from Mark, just vague complaints about growing apart, but hearing it from her painted a different picture. That sounds tough, I said quietly, leaning back against the bench. I've been there in a way. My last relationship in college. We were intense, thought it was forever. But it ended in flames, constant fights, me feeling like I wasn't enough. Since then, I've just shut down. Work, run, repeat. It's safe, but it's empty sometimes. Lena turned to me, her eyes searching mine with a warmth that made my pulse quicken. Exactly. That emptiness where you wonder if you'll ever let anyone in again. But talking like this, it doesn't feel so scary. We sat there for a bit, the breeze rustling the grass around us. Then I broached the elephant in the room. Do you worry about Mark finding out? About us running into each other like this? She shrugged, but I caught a flicker of unease. A little, but honestly, he's moved on, got a new girlfriend, new life. I doubt he'd care. What about you? He's your old friend. I hesitated, the weight of it settling in. Yeah, it crosses my mind. We were tight back in the day, road trips, late night talks about nothing. But we've barely spoken since the divorce. Still, it feels complicated. Lena laughed softly, a sound that eased the tension. Life's like a bad soap opera sometimes, isn't it? Ex-wives and old friends on blind dates, who writes this stuff? The humor broke through and we both chuckled, the moment lightening as we stood to keep walking. By the time we looped back to the parking lot, the sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows. Lena paused by her car, turning to me with a genuine smile. This was nice, Ben. Better than I expected after that cafe surprise. I agreed, feeling a pull I couldn't ignore. Yeah, it was. Let's do it again sometime? She nodded, and as she drove off, I lingered there, replaying our talk. The past with Mark loomed larger now, a shadow I knew I'd have to face. But for the first time, it didn't scare me off. It just made me want to see her more. After that park walk, things with Lena started picking up in a way that felt natural, almost inevitable. I'd text her midweek about a new cafe I'd heard about down by the Boulder Creek, and she'd reply with a quick, "I'm in. Friday after work?" We'd meet at these quiet spots along the river path, the water rushing softly in the background as we strolled, picking up smooth stones and skipping them across the surface like kids. Our talks deepened without forcing it. She'd share her dreams of starting an art class for underprivileged kids at the community center, sketching out ideas on napkins while we sipped iced teas. I'd tell her about my half-baked plans to build a small cabin someday out in the foothills. Nothing fancy, just a place with a porch and a view of the mountains. There was no pressure to impress. It was just us being real. I didn't have to play the tough guy from the job site, and she didn't have to hide the parts of her that still ached from the past. We fell into this rhythm. Coffee runs turning into long evenings, walks extending into dinners we threw together at her place or mine. One afternoon, she invited me over to her apartment near the university, a cozy spot with bookshelves lining the walls and a balcony overlooking a little garden. I need help with a leaky faucet, she said over the phone, her voice light. I grabbed my toolbox and headed over, spending the afternoon under her sink, wrench in hand, while she sat on the counter chatting about a frustrating day with a group of freshmen who couldn't navigate the library database. When I fixed it, water flowing steady again, she handed me a cold beer and pulled out ingredients for pasta. We cooked side by side, me chopping garlic, her stirring the sauce, and ended up eating on her couch, plates balanced on our laps, watching an old copy of Forrest Gump she'd dug out from her collection. The movie played on, and we laughed at the same parts, quoting lines back and forth. But as it wound down, the room grew quiet, the only sound the hum of the fridge and the distant traffic outside. Our hands brushed accidentally at first, then lingered. Neither of us pulled away. I don't want fireworks anymore, Lena said softly, her eyes on the screen but her words aimed at me. I've had enough of that, the highs that crash into lows. I just want someone I can sit in silence with, without worrying they'll leave when things get real. I turned to her, my heart steady but full. That's what I like about this too. No games. With you, I don't have to pretend I'm unbreakable. Work beats me down some days, and I can just Be tired around you. She squeezed my hand and we sat like that until the credits rolled, the connection between us growing without a single dramatic declaration. But as good as it felt, the shadow of Mark kept nagging at me. I couldn't shake the guilt, like I was crossing some invisible line. One evening after dropping Lena off, I sat in my truck and pulled up his contact. We'd barely talked in years, but I knew I had to face it. "Hey man, coffee this weekend? Got something to talk about," I texted. He replied quick, "Sure, usual spot Saturday?" The bar was the same dive we'd haunted in college. Sticky floors, neon signs flickering over pool tables. Mark showed up looking the same. Broad shoulders from his gym habit, a new tattoo peeking from his sleeve. We ordered beers, shot the breeze about work, him in sales now, closing deals on software, and old times. Then I laid it out straight and simple. I've been seeing Lena. It started as a blind date setup, total coincidence, but it's become something more. His face hardened, the easy grin vanishing. He set his bottle down hard enough to slosh foam over the rim. "You're kidding, right? Lena, my ex-wife Lena? What the hell, Ben? You know our history. You were at the wedding, for Christ's sake." I kept my voice level, meeting his eyes. "I know, and that's why I'm telling you now. It's not about sneaking around. We ran into each other, talked, and it just clicked. She's different now, Mark. Happier, I think." He leaned forward, knuckles white around the bottle. "Different? You have no idea what she put me through, the arguments, the cold shoulders, the way she'd shut down. She's good at drawing you in, but wait till the shine wears off. You'll be just like me, wondering what happened." Anger flared in me, but I held it back. "This isn't about you or the past, it's about us now. I respect our friendship, but I won't walk away from something real just because it's complicated." The conversation spiraled. Him calling me a backstabber, me insisting I was trying to do the right thing by being upfront. He stood up abruptly, tossing cash on the table. "Do what you want, man, but don't come crying when it blows up." He stormed out, leaving me alone with my half-empty beer and a knot in my gut. Driving home, I replayed it all, questioning if I'd just torched an old bond for something new and uncertain. But deep down, I knew it was the only way forward. When I got to my apartment, Lena was waiting. I'd texted her about the meetup. She opened the door before I knocked, her face etched with worry. "How'd it go?" I sank onto the couch, rubbing my temples. "Not great. He was pissed, called me a traitor, warned me you'd break my heart like you did his." Her eyes welled up and she sat beside me, taking my hand. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to lose a friend over this." I shook my head, pulling her closer. "If a friend leaves because I'm honest about my life, maybe he wasn't one to begin with. This us feels right. I'm not backing down." That night, we lay on the couch, her head on my chest, hands intertwined. For the first time, the quiet wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I realized then that what I felt for Lena wasn't just attraction. It was a foundation, something solid I wanted to build on, no matter the fallout. Once that conversation with Mark faded into the rearview, Lena and I took a quiet step forward without fanfare. It started small. One evening, she showed up at my door with a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, her toothbrush poking out of the side pocket. "I figured if we're doing this, I might as well have a drawer here," she said, her tone casual but her eyes searching mine for reassurance. I pulled her inside, cleared out half my dresser without a second thought, and hung a few extra hooks in the bathroom for her towels. My apartment, a basic one-bedroom rental with scuffed hardwood floors and a view of the parking lot, suddenly felt less like a pit stop and more like a shared space. Her books started stacking up on the coffee table, mostly art history and novels with dog-eared pages. And soon, little potted plants appeared on the windowsill, their green leaves catching the morning light. Mornings became our ritual. I'd wake up first, the alarm buzzing at dawn for my early shift at the site, and shuffle to the kitchen to brew coffee in my old French press. The aroma would pull her from bed, her hair tousled and eyes still sleepy, wrapping herself in one of my flannel shirts that hung loose on her frame. She'd perch on the counter while I scrambled eggs or toasted bread, adding slices of avocado because she insisted it made everything better. We'd eat standing up sometimes, leaning against the counters, trading bites and stories about our days ahead. Me griping about the foreman pushing deadlines on the school build, her planning a new exhibit setup at the library. There was no rush, no scripted romance. It was just us, starting the day together in that unhurried way that made the world outside feel manageable. Evenings were where the healing really sank in. I'd come home dusty from the job, shoulders aching from lifting beams, and she'd have a hot shower running or a simple meal waiting. Nothing elaborate like grilled cheese with tomato soup on rainy nights, or salads tossed with whatever was in the fridge. We'd sit on the balcony if the weather held, her sketching idly in a notebook while I nursed a beer, the flatiron silhouetted against the sunset. One night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, she opened up about the darker days after her divorce. There were months where I didn't leave the house except for work, she admitted, her pencil pausing on the page. I'd stare at the walls, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. Like a part of me got left behind with Mark. I set my drink down and took her hand. I get that. After my breakup, I threw myself into work so hard I forgot how to just be. But being here with you, it reminds me I don't have to carry it all alone. We didn't shy away from the hard stuff. I'd confess my fears about not being enough for someone, about repeating old mistakes, and she'd listen without judgment, her fingers tracing circles on my palm. In turn, she'd share her vulnerabilities, like the panic that hit her sometimes, the worry that she'd push people away like she felt she had with Mark. But instead of letting those fears drive wedges, we'd turn them into bridges. I'd fix little things around the place to make it ours. A squeaky door hinge that drove her nuts, or installing shelves for her growing collection of sketchbooks. She'd surprise me with small gestures, like packing my lunch with a note tucked inside. Don't let the foreman get to you. See you tonight. It wasn't grand romance, it was the everyday acts that mended the cracks we'd both carried for so long. One weekend, we tackled the apartment together, turning it into a project. I repainted the living room walls a soft gray she picked out, the kind that made the space feel warmer under the afternoon light. She hung curtains she'd sewn herself, simple linen ones that fluttered in the breeze, and we rearranged the furniture to create a cozy nook by the window where she could draw. As we worked, music playing from my old speaker, some indie folk playlist she'd curated, we'd bump into each other, laughing at the paint smudges on our clothes. This feels good, she said at one point, stepping back to admire the fresh coat. Like we're building something, not just fixing up a rental. I wiped a streak of gray from her cheek and pulled her close. We are, one wall at a time. Those moments stacked up, layer by layer. We'd grocery shop on Saturdays, wandering the aisles of the local market, debating over apples or debating which cheese went best with crackers. Back home, we'd cook. Her teaching me how to make a proper marinara from scratch, me grilling steaks on the tiny balcony barbecue I'd rigged up. Nights blurred into comfort, curling up on the couch with a movie, her head on my shoulder, or lying in bed talking until sleep claimed us. One rainy evening, as the drops pattered against the roof, she turned to me in the dark. I used to dread storms. They made the loneliness echo louder. But now, with you here, it's just peaceful. I kissed her forehead, feeling the same. The apartment wasn't just mine anymore, it was ours, filled with her laughter, her sketches pinned to the fridge, and the quiet assurance that we were mending each other without even trying. We dreamed aloud, too, in those late hours. She'd talk about expanding her art classes, maybe renting a small studio downtown for workshops. I'd share visions of that cabin, logs I'd cut myself, a stone fireplace for winter nights. No timelines, no pressure, just possibilities that felt reachable because we were facing them together. And through it all, the small things healed us. A shared glance across the room, a hand on my back after a long day, the way she'd hum while watering her plants. Mark's anger lingered in the back of my mind sometimes, a faint echo, but it couldn't touch this. The life we were quietly constructing, one shared meal, one fixed shelf, one honest conversation at a time. With those everyday moments stacking up like bricks in a wall we were building together, our life settled into a rhythm that felt solid, unshakable. One early summer morning, the kind where the sun filters through the blinds in golden streaks, and the birds outside our window chirp like they've got the whole day planned, I woke to the soft clink of mugs in the kitchen. Lena was already up, wearing my old t-shirt that hung loose on her hair still messy from sleep. She stood by the counter pouring coffee into our mismatched cups, the one with the chip from my college days and the floral one she'd brought over. The aroma filled the apartment, mixing with the faint scent of her lavender shampoo. She turned as I shuffled in, smiling that soft, unguarded way she did only in these quiet hours. "Morning," she murmured, stepping close to wrap her arms around me from behind as I reached for the fridge. Her head rested against my back, warm and familiar. I turned in her embrace, kissing her forehead lightly. "You beat me to the coffee today." She laughed quietly, her eyes meeting mine with a depth that still caught me off guard sometimes. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this settled again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like home isn't just a place, but this, waking up knowing you're here." I pulled her tighter, feeling the steady beat of her heart against mine. "We're here because we choose it every day. Not some twist of fate, but us deciding to stay." She nodded, and we stood like that for a while, the coffee steaming on the counter, the world outside humming to life without us needing to rush into it. We didn't race to the altar or make grand promises about forever. We'd both learned the hard way that life doesn't work like that. Instead, we let our commitment show in the small ways. Her leaving notes in my lunch cooler before I headed to the site, me picking up her favorite herbal tea on the way home from a long day framing walls at the school project. Mark knew about us by then. Word had gotten back through mutual friends, but he never reached out. No angry calls, no dramatic confrontations, just silence. At first, it stung a bit, like losing the last thread of an old friendship. But I didn't chase it. I thanked whatever forces had pushed us apart, because without that distance, I might never have found this path with Lena. She handled it with grace too, saying one evening over dinner, "He's in his own story now. We don't owe explanations anymore." Our days unfolded simply but richly. Lena dove deeper into her passion, starting those art classes for kids at the local community center. Twice a week, she'd come home with paint smudges on her hands and stories about a shy boy who'd finally opened up through his drawings. I'd listen over stir-fry I'd whipped up, sharing my own wins from the job, like finally getting the gymnasium roof sealed against the unpredictable Colorado weather. We supported each other without smothering. When she had late nights prepping lesson plans at the library, I'd have a bath drawn and her favorite book waiting. When I came home bone-tired from hauling lumber, she'd rub my shoulders and remind me why I loved building things that lasted. Weekends became our sanctuary. We'd hit the farmer's market downtown, her arm linked in mine as we sampled cheeses and picked out fresh produce for the week. Back home, we'd experiment in the kitchen. Her baking apple crisps from scratch. Me grilling veggies on the balcony setup I'd improved with a few extra hooks for tools. We'd talk about the future in whispers, not blueprints. Her expanding the classes to include teens, me eyeing a promotion that could mean steadier hours and maybe saving for that cabin someday. No deadlines, just shared visions that made the present feel fuller. And in the quieter times, like rainy afternoons when we'd curl up with books or puzzles, I'd catch her looking at me with a piece I hadn't seen in her eyes before. "We've come a long way from that awkward cafe," she'd say, and I'd pull her close, grateful for every step. Looking back, I never imagined a blind date could rewrite my life like this. But Lena's return wasn't fate's cruel joke. It was an invitation to heal, to grow, to love again with the wisdom of scars. We forgave the past, Mark's role in it, our own mistakes, the hurts we'd carried alone. And in their place, we chose each other daily, through shared coffees, fixed faucets, and silent storms. One evening, as we sat on the balcony, her sketching the sunset while I read beside her, our hands intertwined without a word, I realized this was it. Not forever sworn in,